As the mayor of Edson, I call this meeting to order.
About time. About time.
Can I get a motion, please, that the agenda for the May 21st, 2019 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented? Councillor Chouinard will make that motion.
As a councillor, I'll make this motion.
Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that the minutes of the May 7th, 2019 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented? Councillor Wilkinson will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. We have no public hearings, no delegations. Can I get a motion, please, that council give first reading to the proposed council procedural bylaw number 2230? Councillor Sorensen will make that motion. And I think everything is pretty set forth there in the documentation. Does anybody have any further questions, comments, or concerns? Councillor Beyer.
Yeah, just through the chair to administration, just one question. So regarding the notice of motion on number 8 there, can you give an example in the past year when this would have been ideal to be used, like just for future considerations, if there was something that sparks an idea?
CEO Derrick.
Sure. So one that comes to mind off the top of my head would be certain members of council having interest in ARETA, for example, exploring ARETA. That might be an opportunity whereby the notice of motion process would be appropriate. Okay. So some program or concept that a councillor has learned about or feels is a good fit and is otherwise not on the agenda.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council proclaim the week of May 19th to 25th, 2019 National Public Works Week? Councillor Bevan will make that motion. And everything there is in the agenda package. Pretty self-explanatory. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to add, if you're not, I'm not sure this council has interacted with this proclamations policy before, but just that one of the main requirements is that there is actually some events or some activities going on in association with the event. And in this case, our Public Works Department is planning on hosting a public session and engaging and bringing some awareness to the issue. So it meets that test in the policy.
All right, thank you, CEO Derrick. Councillor Chouinard and then Councillor Beyer.
I'm actually pleased that we're doing this, but I know when they're having the barbecue, I know it's for them, but I think what we should look at is having council host them, like taking part in the barbecue, and just would be something that we can give back to them. Not being involved, but we'd be there cooking up burgers for them.
If I can speak to that, Councillor Chouinard, we are hosting a barbecue for all staff, and I would hate for us to single out one particular group of staff members in our community, but we are going to be having that one. I think it's coming up in June, so. Or July. Is it June or July?
It's July. July 16th, I think.
Yeah. Councillor Beyer and then Councillor Chouinard.
Through the chair to administration, so is it only equipment on display, or are there any like interactive displays that shows how our sewer system works, or the wastewater treatment plant, or something like that?
Thank you. As far as I know at this point, the plan is just to display a few pieces of the equipment. Not to say that they couldn't do some other types of activities in the future, but.
All right, thank you, Councillor Beyer. Councillor Chouinard. And Councillor Wilkinson.
Actually, just my early comment, not just limited to this, but extended in the future, maybe to all the departments, would be a way of us getting involved, and I do appreciate we're doing it for all.
Yeah. Councillor Wilkinson.
Well, the way I read it, council could go to this. It's open to the public, so we can partake that way. And I was just wondering through administration, what equipment are we showing? The stuff in our asset management plan?
We're going to show some of our, Okay. I'm not sure exactly which pieces. I think we'll have at least one of the Willy loader pieces of equipment there, as well as a few others. Just a chance for the public to interact with our Public Works Department, and obviously Public Works is quite proud of the work they do and happy to share some of that with the members of our community.
Thank you. Councillor Bevan.
Administration. I don't know how many people have seen our new snowplow we got out there at the airport. Maybe that's something we can bring down there to show them what we do to keep our airport nice and ship shape throughout the months here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council adopt the 2018 asset management plan? Who would like to make that motion? Councillor Byer will make that motion, and we have Ms. Bittner joining us to give us a brief overview of what we discussed last week. So go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's not really much to add from last week. I think Mr. Van der Hayden from Citywide gave a very good presentation and overview of it. This is just a sort of a formal adoption of the plan so that administration and council can start using it as one of our tools for our future planning.
All right. Council, you have any questions, comments, or concerns? Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to Ms. Bittner, do you have a timeline when council would be expecting to see some of these pieces come back to us?
We are, for strategic planning, we're looking at bringing capital plans forward, so they would be incorporated in those sorts of planning things that we would have. We are still having to do some training on it ourselves as administration. There's still some training to be done from Citywide for the people who'd be using it. So we still have a little bit of learning to do as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Curry.
Through the chair, I just want to say I'm really excited to see what comes forward with this. I think it's fantastic, and I think it really helps council to make evidence-educated decisions. So thank you for all the work that I know it took a lot of work from the staff, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Bevan.
Is there, on the machinery and equipment here and that, we're going to more of a leasing right now, are we, than buying outright? How does that figure in when every so many years we turn it over? Our equipment should be in actually really nice shape going forward in that. And yeah, we get a net with it here and that because we don't put enough money into it every year.
Through the chair to Councillor Bevan, we are moving towards leasing some of the larger pieces. We already have leased a few. I'm not really sure how to answer your question, I'm afraid. Unless Mr. Derrick can help me.
Thank you. I think that whether you lease or purchase, I think the condition of the asset is still what it is, and so the intention of the asset management plan is to reflect the costs of maintaining the levels of service, and so I think it takes into consideration those critical pieces of equipment and is less concerned with whether you lease or purchase them. It may have some impact on the kind of the financial piece, but overall I think it's only a small variable. Yeah.
All right, any other questions, comments, or concerns? Just a follow up to Councillor Bevan's comment there. Going through this list and the report card, some things kind of popped out at me, and I'm wondering if the snapshot in time was taken maybe 2 years ago or a year ago, because I know we've really invested a lot in equipment over the last 2 years, and we've purchased some new equipment at the fire hall, etc. I was a little surprised that we got the low scores because we actually have some fairly new equipment. So could that have an impact on why we're showing an F when in actual fact, since these numbers came up, we might actually have new equipment in inventory?
Yes, Your Worship. This was a snapshot in time as at December of 2017. We had to have a cut-off time so they could actually build the plan, and otherwise it would just keep on going and never finish. So this was a snapshot in time at December 2017. So that's what's called the 2018 Asset Management Plan.
Okay.
So there is some things from 2018 to still be put in, etc., on our actual database for us moving forward. It's one of these things that's never going to be, this is what it is, and we work off this piece of paper for the next few years. This is just a snapshot in time, and we'll always be updating it as we go forward.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council adopt the town subdivision securities policy DP16 as presented and effective immediately? Councillor Bevan will make that motion, and we have Mr. Verhage, our general manager of planning and development, joining us. Mr. Verhage, take it away.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. I don't have anything to add beyond what's already contained within the report, but just as a reminder with regards to this policy, it's to set up a consistent approach towards dealing with land developers so that we know how staging and acceptance of infrastructure is being done. That would be prepared as part of that subdivision. There's clarity on the amount of securities we'll be requiring, as well as the timeframes and the release points for those securities. Previously, we simply had a policy for securities for development, which were really undershooting the type of safety level we would want or surety level we would want as a municipality. The maximum we could have gotten was $50,000, which is obviously not comparable to the cost of a larger subdivision like Hillendale, which costs millions of dollars. So this will put us in line with most other towns with regards to private development. And it's been discussed in committee.
All right. Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Chenard.
Through the chair, we have been having problems with this then, that we have to come up with a policy to address it?
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Wilkinson, I wouldn't say that we've had a big problem necessarily, but we also haven't had a lot of private developers who've come in with significant infrastructure requests. But if we were looking at ones, one example would be, I think, Skyview, where there wasn't appropriate securities taken, design standards weren't approved in advance, and the town ended up having to take over that development and basically pull it forward. So the other problem, though, I like to point out is when you don't have clear policies, you create unknowns. Unknowns create worry and cost and risk for private developers. So just simply being able to clearly articulate your requirements and what the plan will be moving forward provides that surety so they can build their business case.
Through the chair, can I just ask
One
one more
follow-up,
question? Is this going to be restricted to new developers?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Wilkinson, the question would be is if we had no policy and I could choose to take any security I wanted and create any standard of infrastructure I wanted, that would be restrictive. This is simply stating a very clear policy of if you come to the town, if you get approved for subdivision, and if you build infrastructure that we will be required to take over and maintain for perpetuity, that will be built in a certain way, that will be built in a certain time frame, and you will provide us a certain surety that you will undertake that work to our standard. So I don't think it'll restrict them any more than they would find in any other community.
I hope not, we should be open.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilkinson.
If I may just add to that, to your worship,
ahead.
with securities, there's always the balance between creating an environment where developers, it's attractive for developers versus protecting the public interest. And so this policy was developed with that in mind, where we want to make sure that developers are responsible to meet the standards that we have in the community that protects the public interest, and that's measured against ensuring that it's some of the unknowns are eliminated and developers can have a comfortable time in our community.
All right, thank you, Councillor Chenard.
Mine's kind of a two-part question through. I mean, I am pleased with this because I can tell you, like, the old way didn't make sense. If you were doing a $500,000 project, or like Hillendale, $10 million, you paid. Now, where it says 75%, so could you give me an example of how much a project would be? And I mean, I totally agree, bear in mind, if a project, if we can use Skyview for an example, when it goes wrong, the cost of repairing it, we have to have adequate security, but also echoing the room, we don't want to scare people away, but I truly believe you're doing a $10 million project, you shouldn't have a $50,000 security deposit, but if you're doing a $500,000, $50,000 may be a little bit rich. So I like the policy, but could you give me an example of approximately what it would cost per project and, virtually protecting the town's interest?
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Chouinard. So in effect, if someone came forward and they got a 10-lot subdivision, let's say, with a little, keyhole road, I'll think of Bruner, I think it is, Avenue in the northwest of town. If that road was $110,000 and underground infrastructure was coming to around $60,000, and stormwater ditching or overland containment required another $50,000 worth of grading work. And then there was some publicly dedicated land to hold that stormwater, which also had to be landscaped. If the total cost of that project came to, let's say, you're looking at $250,000, $300,000. This is all, these aren't real numbers, but $300,000. Effectively, we would take $225,000. That'd be taken as a letter of credit, or we can take other forms of securities, letter of credit's preferred. Basically, that means that the bank says they have $225,000 on a line of credit. That's there. They don't pay anything on that, other than they pay to get the line of credit, right? So there's a small cost to them. It's a little bit cheaper than bonding. But that money's essentially there so that we can walk into the bank with the letter and pull it out in cash all at once anytime we want during the time frame of that security. During this entire period, this will be based on a joint agreement between them and us, where we've agreed to what needs to be built, what standard needs to be built in, and what the inspection schedule will be. They essentially install the infrastructure based on a design, which is either in accordance with our minimum design standards or another design that they've put forward that our engineering department has been willing to accept. Once we've now agreed to a standard, then it establishes that cost. They provide us a security on it. They set their own time frame for development. However, typically we will secure that within a 2-year period, because if they're going too long, there are problems with planning decisions that eke out into longer time frames. However, it's not uncommon for development agreements to actually go out into a 5-year period due to the complexities of that type of work. As they install it, they could ask for a portion of security back on each component of infrastructure they complete. So once they've put in the base and put in the road, technically they could ask for some money back right there. However, as part of this policy, we said you can only ask for monies back twice during the process, which means that they most likely will wait till they've finished all of their initial construction that they can within a season. Then they'll probably ask us to inspect it so they can start the warranty periods and get back the majority of the security related to that installation. Once they go through usually a winter season, whatever the warranty period is for that piece of infrastructure, they then could get the money back as a final take. In some cases, they may ask us to do just components of it rather than the entire project at once, at which point then we would basically state that they're leaving that money with us until the project's done. So our intention is to always make sure we've got enough to complete the project, should they walk away from the project. But there is a level of risk that we have, because we're not taking 100% of the value plus a little extra in some places. They do that just to make sure they've got costs of interest and escalating costs covered. But does that answer your question?
That answers my question, and I do like the idea of a policy.
All right, thank you, Councillor Schnard. Councillor Swanson.
Through the chair, one comment just on this general discussion, and then a quick comment on the wording. But I would state that this is a very important policy. Having clarity and transparency for the business community and the developers is critical. And now a developer can take this with him to the bank and say exactly how much of a deposit he needs, and he can do it. He can reduce it in 2 draws, and clarity is what will drive development in our community. Unknown red tape is what really stalls things. On one of the revisions in just recently, the pronouns his and her were added into the wording, and I thought we had a general we're striving not to include his, her pronouns, so I think it would be quite easy to revise that to in the discretion of the manager, or it is the discretion of the manager to limit, so you don't have to use those words. Thanks.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to take that under advisement. That's also an editorial change that I can approve under my authority as well. So I think if council was to pass that, we can deal with that editorial change. But we're certainly working to remove that type of gender-based language wherever possible.
Thank you. Any other further questions, comments, or concerns? Do you have it? Yeah, go right ahead. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, through the chair. Maybe I don't understand this, but where do off-site levies fit in here?
They don't. With regards to the subdivision security, this is completely separate of off-site levies. Off-site levies don't. This would usually only deal with the construction of infrastructure directly related and being built because of a specific subdivision, and then being dedicated to us for ownership. Whereas the off-site levies actually ask for a contribution towards the larger cost. So actually, if you look into our asset management plan as a common piece, that's where you would see a lot of facilities such as, the Grand Prairie Water Reservoir, several million bucks. The sewage facilities, dozens of millions of dollars. Distribution and road systems, getting into that $100 million kind of range. And so those offsite levies are actually contributions from developers to pay for those things that allow them to actually develop. Because if we didn't have a wastewater treatment plant, they'd have no service. If we didn't have water systems, they'd have no service. If we didn't pay for major infrastructure upgrades at our intersections with the highway, they wouldn't have service. So,
Okay, through the chair. Originally, I understood that offsite levies paid for that stormwater, sewer, the roads, etc. And then we accumulated this, so we had some accumulation to start if we were doing another subdivision. When I first came on, I thought that that's what offsite levies were for, these exact same things.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I think to simplify it as much as possible, there's a distinction between on-site and off-site infrastructure. This is dealing with what we would call on-site infrastructure, things that are actually being built right on the property that's being subdivided. Off-site are other pieces of infrastructure in the community that exist in support of the development as described.
So not our road that would lead to this.
That's where an off-site levy may apply to an arterial road or to a sewage,
Storm
to a
sewer
yep, to a storm sewer pond, those types of things. So, in addition to the securities and the development of the infrastructure on-site, they would also be required to contribute any off-sites that are applicable at any given time.
So a bit more money than this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. From my point of view, I think this is vitally important. I think where we've ran into problems before, it hasn't been clear, and we don't. Different staff may be doing different things and treating different developers differently based on personal relationships or other reasons. This sets things out much more clearly, and everybody will have some certainty. Which, as we know, with pipelines and other things, any kind of uncertainty causes a great deal of complications in moving projects forward. So I'm in full support of this. Do we have any developments, I guess, through to administration that are going to be impacted by this immediately that you're aware of? Or is there nothing really in the works? I'd hate for somebody to be kind of surprised by this.
Mr. Chairman, Council, we do have some developers who've recently come in and done subdivision. However, we've applied the smaller securities. Luckily with that, the majority of the infrastructure was already in place in those areas, so the risk level was low for us, so we made sure that we had the policy together into a place where we wanted it before we brought it, rather than bringing it forward immediately as an issue. So no, we don't try to spring anything on someone through the process. And in fact, in cases where you're working on changes to policy while people are in process, that's usually a discussion I would recommend we have as to whether it applies or not, given a certain date, simply because you don't want to create unsurety for a developer, otherwise it really hampers their business.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilkinson.
One more question through the chair. Is this policy going to apply to the one that we turned down at our last council meeting?
Mr. Chairman, and through to Councillor Wilkinson. Yes, this would apply to every subdivision that created infrastructure that we would assume. The only issue with that subdivision is, from my understanding, we didn't actually require that applicant to really do anything. He was dedicating a roadway, but he wasn't building anything. That had its own risks related to it for us, but there was really no cost related to that development because there was no physical infrastructure that he was installing that we would assume. If he had been building the arterial road that was proposed for dedication, then of course we'd have an agreement like this.
Okay, so no more additional cost if he reapplies.
Yeah, this does not actually create cost. All this does is it says you have to provide a surety for the
Surety means money to me. So.
If I may, I'll just add to that. This policy does not apply to every subdivision. So you can still subdivide property, but without adding infrastructure, there's no need to take securities. So this only applies to properties where we would end up owning infrastructure at the end of the process.
Okay, thank you. Any other further questions, comments, or concerns? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that Council declare Plan 812-1508, Block 1, previously the location of the Edson District Recreation Complex, as land that is surplus to the needs of the town per policy PS3 regarding the sale of town-owned lands. Ooh.
All the old
I seen
councillors.
Councillor Byer put up her hand first,
Okay.
and I think we know what's going on here. I don't know if anybody has any questions, comments, or concerns. Councillor Chenard.
Will that dollar be a loony? I'm just.
Oh, we're not on that motion yet. Right, any other questions, comments, or concerns?
Oh, right.
All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council resolve to transfer the subject lands back to the Edson Golf Club for the price of $1 as a specified use for the donated land that was donated to the Edson District Recreation Complex, and it is no longer being used for that purpose. Councillor Chenard will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Go ahead, Councillor Chenard.
Okay, now I can make the comment. Will that be a loony or a paper dollar? But I'm just glad this is over and done, that we can move forward.
All right, thank you, Councillor.
I would
Yeah.
just like to say hallelujah. I'm really glad we've got the resolution on this.
All
Very
right,
nice.
thanks. Mr. Verhage, you have anything you want to add?
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Chouinard, with the amount of monies involved because of money laundering issues within the real estate business that have occurred in BC and the investigations there, we'd likely have to have this verified by a bank. So,
Bank draft.
Yeah, for dollar.
All right, Councillor Sorensen.
I'm in full support of this motion, and I've only been around for under 2 years, but couldn't wait for it to get done.
Yeah.
But last time we discussed this topic, there was some question on whether the golf club was registered with the province as a non-profit organization.
Go ahead, Mr. Verhage.
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Sorensen. Yes, so we've looked into that, and they aren't listed within the regular list of not-for-profits that we looked under for registries. However, when looking under them as a society and looking under their proper registered name, we do find that they do qualify with regards to what is considered a not-for-profit business under the Municipal Government Act. So it is a designation to a registered not-for-profit
All right, thank you.
for our purpose.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Councillor Byer.
Through the hair to Mr. Verhage. So just to follow up on Councillor Sorensen's question then, so does that streamline this process a little bit easier then, or simplify it? as you
Mr.
mentioned
Verhage.
before?
Mr. Chairman, through Councillor Byers. At this time, the only thing that would need to happen is we'll prepare the documentation for signing. And then, actually, it's pretty straightforward. The longest part of this process at this point should probably be the registration of land titles. So that takes several weeks.
All right, thank you. Councillor Curry.
Through the chair, did we get any public feedback at all?
Mr. Verhage.
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Curry, I have not personally heard of anything, and I don't believe that we have anything on file. So it's been relatively straightforward.
Fantastic, thank you.
All right, thank you. I haven't heard any issues with this at all, actually quite the opposite. So I'm glad that it's moving forward. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. We have no information items, no sundry items, council committee reports. We're going back to March the 8th, and we will start with Councillor May 8th.
March 8th.
May 8th, I guess. We'll go with Councillor Bevan.
May 8th. May 16th here at a board of directors meeting for the Yellowhead Community Futures and that. And in there we had they're sending out their Smart Start, which is going to be done in Jasper and Hinton this year. Next year they're going to do it in Edson, I believe it is. And on this here Smart Start there, it's setting your business up for success. Especially they're doing it in Hinton this year. Next year is Jasper. Year after that is Edson. And 90% of the businesses and people that took it completed it. And in the 3 to 5 years, 35% of them survived in that. Next meeting is June the 20th, which is in Wildwood, and it is our AGM. So everybody's invited to come out. And that is it, and I will leave the rest for you on that part.
All right, but Councillor Curry is not next. Councillor Byer.
Never once been
So
first.
on May 9th, I attended the Synergy meeting on behalf of Councillor Bevan. He was unable to attend. And I sent you guys an email the other day about all the discussion on that and the Coleman presentation. That was really great. And then on May 13th, I attended the Youth Council meeting here. And they're currently working on a plastic bag ban research that they intend to present to council. So we'll save that for them. And also they're going to review the mayor for the day that we've sent back to them. And they had a question on GSAs in our schools and communities. So we might hear more about that from them as well going forward. And May 15th, I attended the Edson Library Board meeting. We had a lady come out from the Yellowhead Regional Library Board to give our board a information session on a plan of service because the library's plan of service is coming due. So we wanted to get a jump start on it, and she had excellent information on how to engage it with the community. And but her suggestions weren't just library based; it was go broader than that and then filter it out. So it's really, really interesting. And we updated a few of our policies at that meeting as well. And then on May 17th, I had a library board building committee meeting. So we kind of go around the building and check things out and have some discussions on what we can do with the space that we have already in that building. So that's it for me.
All right, thank you, Councillor Byer. Councillor Curry.
Tricky
Three's a good
today.
number.
On May 8th, I had a Edson District Chamber of Commerce meeting, and just a few updates from there. Darlene, the president there, also did a interview with CBC on the pipeline at the same time that I believe our mayor did it. So just check out that to see it's going, how it's going. A really interesting thing that I thought was pretty forward thinking of them, so I'm sure we'll hear about it, is it was brought to their attention that they would like the business chamber to look at starting the recycling in the plastic bags, and that they would like to start a subcommittee at actually the business being the ones that are the forefronts of that, starting to make the changes instead of us having to force it on them. So they are going to look at having a subcommittee to discuss how the business could take that on and what they could do and their role could be. Trade show was really successful. With a little bit of a power, they had a little bit less of attendance with that little bit of a power outage issue we had, but it did not affect them as much as they had expected. So they were really pleasantly surprised with that. And then just they were just discussing, and that's kind of with Community Futures too, which I'll get to, some of the business workshops that they've been doing. So the from stress to resilient one that they did at the museum, got 26 businesses were represented. So that's really fantastic. So as much as we can continue to help promote those, that is being helped fund by Alberta Labour, and those are free workshops for businesses, and they have one coming up on the 6th that is coaching for leaders. So they were really, really impressed. That's the biggest one, so it kind of lets us know that resiliency and stress lets us know where they're at, what they're struggling with. And then also on the 16th had the Community Futures, and I would only add a few things to what Councillor Bevan said. Just with the Smart Sparts, it's not being offered here, but Edson businesses can take it. So you can apply if Edson businesses are interested. And it is for entrepreneurs, so I think you had to be less than 2 years. I think was the, but it's tons of information at a really small cost and training. So Edson businesses can take it. They would just have to travel to Hinton to do it, and then next year it'll be here. And then I will leave. We have our performance results for Community Futures because they just had to do their final report to the grant funding. And
Pass this to Jackie, she can.
yeah, so this is all the information. We'll leave it on the back table. And then we will also print out some information, but just some things to know. Total number of business training sessions of participants this year, 475 participants participated. Number of business advisory services, 980. And then total number of loans, 15. Number of jobs created, maintained, and expanded through lending was 57 for the region. So yeah, but we can get a printout of that and leave it on the back table. That's my update.
All right, thank you. Councillor Sorensen.
May 8th, I had the West Steelhead Regional Waste Management Authority meeting with the mayor, and one of the key results of that meeting is we passed a motion to move towards a commission-based structure by the end of the year. We've asked the Technical Advisory Committee to develop a plan of action and some cost estimates on what that would entail. So, and then obviously it would come back to each town's council to ratify that decision. But that's a major move for the authority, and I think it's a great step forward. On May 13th, I was also at the Youth Council, and Councillor Bayer already covered the majority of that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Schwartz.
Okay, my only thing is May 14th, because our PAC meeting got canceled, and just to comment on all this plastic bag, I think I'm old enough to remember when they campaigned that paper bags are killing all the trees, we must go plastic. So that's just my view on plastic bags.
Councillor Wilkinson.
May the 9th, we had the open house for the steering committee, and I was really pleased with the results of how many people came. And on the 13th, I attended the youth council in your place and really enjoyed meeting with the children. It's nice to hear their views, and that's my report.
All right, thank you. On May the 8th, I had the West Steelhead Regional Waste Management meeting, and just further to what Councillor Sorensen said, there's a great deal of frustration that things have not been progressing the way that we've had hoped with the regional authority in dealing with matters of waste management and waste diversion, and that's one of the catalysts to moving to a commission, so we would have a little bit more authority over staff and where they're spending their resources. So that's going to be an ongoing discussion. Otherwise, I think if we don't move in that direction, there's going to be a few members that are going to be looking at possibly disbanding, just having Hinton send us an invoice for running the landfill. So we'll see how that goes. We had a big discussion about regional initiatives and things such as plastic bags, that it should not be Edson or Jasper doing it on their own. It should be a regional initiative, and it's been a little frustrating getting all partners to row in the same direction when it comes to that sort of stuff. So without question, Edson's been seen as a leader on a lot of issues, and that's hats off to previous councils and this council. On May 9th, we had the multiplex open house, very well attended and lots of good feedback. And then on May 14th, I had the committee of the whole meeting, and that is my report.
Can I quickly add something?
Councillor Curry.
I need to pull a plug in. It's one of my other committees. Historical Society's AGM is Thursday night at 6 p.m. at the museum. If anybody would like to come, you're always welcome to the AGM. So you're welcome.
Councillor Sorensen.
I should also plug the AGM for the Edson and District Recycling Society meeting this Thursday at 5 p.m.
So you got time to do both.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors.
Anyone is involved.
We have no financial reports, questions from media and public regarding items from this council meeting. Go ahead, Mr. Moore.
I remember when the, I'll get to my question eventually, but I'll explain things first. I remember when the anti-smoking bylaws came in and the municipalities and such tried to do it, and the province stepped in to do it. You think this would work with plastic bags better than each municipality going for it?
Ideally, we would see some provincial leadership on these issues, but historically in the last 50 years, I shouldn't say 50 years, since the early 90s, the provincial government has been pretty much disengaged on issues concerning recycling. We see that with the effective producer or extended producer responsibility program. Our new government actually sounds like they're going to be a little bit more engaged on these issues, which is great to see. Ideally, it would be higher levels of government taking these on, so there's a standard across a province or the country. But so we've got to start somewhere, and I'm very thrilled to see that the business community is actually thinking about being the actual leaders on this, so governments don't actually have to impose something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Councillor
Could that be a
Wilkinson.
resolution that we could put into AMA?
We probably could. I don't think we have time for this AUMA. I don't know what the deadlines are, but and I think they actually may have something on that already as a resolution. We got quite a few resolutions on recycling and environmental policy.
Thank you. Kayla's just telling me that the deadline for a resolution is May 31st, which would make that pretty difficult for us to have something prepared for then. But that doesn't mean we can't in future years consider
Well, someone
that.
has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And we did do the resolution last year for extended producer
Right,
responsibility.
exactly, because we need that. We need lots of things going.
All right. Any other further questions? Go ahead. Welcome back.
Oh, thanks, thank you. I just had a question about the demolition project. Has it been completed to the satisfaction of the town? We haven't seen anybody on site for several days. We're not sure whether the project has been completed to your satisfaction, or is there still more work to be done?
See you, Derek. Got.
Thank you. Yes, no, the physically speaking, yes, I think we've reached completion in terms of what we'll be doing physically on site. We haven't completely ended the contract, just reviewing it with Visco, the contractor, to make sure that we are fully satisfied that the scope of work was completed appropriately. But I do not expect you will see additional physical work on site.
At the last meeting, I asked about the right-of-way that currently exists on that property. Has there been any further investigation as to whether that's going to be necessary or will be removed in the future?
Go ahead, or Mr. Verhage.
Yeah, Martino, I think, is prepared to answer that.
Mr. Chairman, so we have looked into it. The road doesn't appear to be necessary, other than we might want to secure some access to the southern portion of the RV lot. However, that can be done by agreement, so actual closure and sale of that land is not problematic. It does require a separate process which needs to be approved by council as well as the minister, public advertising. So it does take quite a bit of time. Usually the average is 3 to 6 months, and then we are at the whim of the minister with regards to the turnaround time. But there should be no issue with the closure if that was something that we were directed to undertake, or if there was an application to do the same.
I think administratively speaking, you can anticipate us bringing that forward for council's consideration. It's now, and for quite some time, has been a road to nowhere, and there's not really any reason or value for us to keep it there, and it may free up the golf club a little further just to make sure that they have full control of that area and ability to operate their business. Their society, I should say.
All right, you have anything else, Mr.
Yeah,
Linford?
the other question I had is, would it be possible to get any information on the infrastructure that's currently on site on that property, just for any future development, so that we know what is there as far as sewer lines and drainage and that kind of stuff? I don't know if those records exist now that the building's gone, but.
Go ahead.
Yeah, administration would be happy to provide any as-built or other information that we have available, although off the top of my head, I cannot tell you how much or how old or how detailed that information will be, but whatever we have, we would obviously be happy to share with the club.
Okay. And just, again, I'd like to thank council for their patience in dealing with this, this issue. It's been on the table for quite a while, and the golf club is prepared to hand over the dollar in any form that council is asking. I understand you take Visa now, credit card, or a loonie, or 20 nickels. However council wants the payment, the golf club would be happy to provide.
Bitcoin.
Yeah, no Bitcoin, no. All right. Thank you, Mr. Linford, and we appreciate the golf club's patience as we've gone through this issue over the last number of years. Some of us a little longer than others, so we're happy that this will be coming to closure here very soon. So, since there's no other further questions, we will take a motion out to move to a closed meeting session. Councillor Byron will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
Okay, I would just.
hang on.
We're online.
Council, can I get a motion, please, for a motion for adjournment? Councillor Shenardo make that motion. All those in favor? Motion carried.